Frozen 2 is now streaming on Disney Plus, and I recently rewatched it because of that. And I realized that I love Frozen 2. I think Frozen 2 is great. I have a little Fire Elemental Frozen 2 pin. And I think that Frozen 2, while it does have some very clear narrative problems, is probably the Disney film of this kind of Disney princess sector that I've liked the most besides Moana. Usually when I watch the film for the first time, I'll be really into it because I do enjoy seeing Disney films in theaters. I grew up on them, so I like them. And yet, the more I rewatch the films, I end up not liking them. Like, I don't really care for Princess and the Frog. Tangled is better than Frozen, but Tangled, to me, the music is just not that engaging to me. I think most of the songs in Frozen are terrible, and other than Let It Go and Elsa's story arc, I honestly don't care for Frozen at all. Brave, not that great. It's okay, but it doesn't really hold up upon rewatching. I love Moana. Moana, I think, is probably the one that I have been able to rewatch over and over and over again, so it's part of my staple. And when I rewatched Frozen 2, I found out that indeed I do love it. I really loved Frozen 2 when I first saw it in theaters. I saw it after a while. I had already heard the mixed reviews about it from people who I really liked. And so I knew all of the criticisms about it. I heard a lot of sort of the setup about the indigenous ancestry being brought into the film. And I wasn't sure how I would feel about it. And when I watched it, you know, I completely got engulfed in it. I loved it. I've been listening to the soundtrack almost every other day since it came out, which is not how I felt about Frozen 1. My feelings on Frozen are, I don't think they're that interesting. I just think that for me, Frozen suffers from the fact that, at least for me, Anna is not that interesting of a protagonist. I don't find her very engaging. She has kind of that very typical YA, I'm clumsy but adorkable energy, which what are you doing? Which I honestly don't particularly enjoy watching on long periods of time. Like, it's cute, and I don't think that Anna's a bad character. She's just not engaging, especially when you have Elsa, who is there and is very dynamic and has a very interesting story that is chopped up because it's also dealing with Anna on her quest to save her sister. I didn't really care for the relationship between her and Kristoff. I despise Olaf, to the point where, like, I've held against Josh Gans for like years. I hate Olaf. The twist with Hans was really good the first time. I think it's probably the only element of the film that I think really carries on upon rewatching besides Elsa's story arc. And also, like, music wise, the only two songs that I like from the Frozen 1 soundtrack are Frozen Heart, which no one else really likes because it just sounds so differently than the rest of the soundtrack, and Let It Go. I think most of Anna's songs are really bad. It has this kind of like singing, talking vibe to it that I'm really not into. I don't like the wordplay in the songs. Yeah, besides the animation, it's not interesting. Let It Go is the best song, and I think it's because it's Idina Menzel and, like, she's the queen. And it sounds like, you know, Defying Gravity. It sounds like all of these really big, power, emotional ballads from Broadway. And it is so different narratively than everything else. It is so much more bombastic and interesting. Open Up the Gates, or whatever that song is that Anna sings, I find it very dull and repetitive. It's like, to me, it's like a lesser version of When Will My Life Begin with Rapunzel. Like, it just doesn't move me. It doesn't make me interested in her character. And I just think they did a disservice by making her the character to which they were going to criticize the whole, I'm going to get married right away. Because I don't think that it really does justice to her character. And then they put her with Kristoff as if it's not almost the same thing. I don't know. It doesn't really work for me, but I know it works for plenty of other people. And so, yeah, that's kind of why when I even said they were going to do a Frozen 2, I was like, the story is done. And I think there was always a big problem for me narratively with Elsa, because Let It Go, when that song ends, you feel like Elsa's going to be a completely different person, or she's going to go through kind of an emotional transformation next time you see her, and she's immediately back where she was in the first act in terms of the uncertainty and terror. And it just it just never really worked for me. And so I was excited to see how in Frozen 2 we were going to see these characters evolve and change, and what the villain or antagonistic force would be in Frozen 2. With all the issues that exist within Frozen 2, I don't think it can be understated that for a film as successful as Frozen to make a sequel in which the big bad is historical colonization is a bold move for sure, especially because the last time that Disney really tried to talk about colonization, they didn't do a great job. I think while this isn't perfect, and there's a friend of mine on Twitter, her name is Allie, I will link to her thread down below because she did a really great tweet thread going through Frozen, and she herself is indigenous, not Sammy as the ethnic group that Kristoff and exists in the real world. But it is an interesting story to have Elsa and Anna grapple with that they have mixed race ancestry, and finding out that they have this new Northumberland heritage that they were denied for colonialist reasons. The movie begins with Anna and Elsa's father telling them that when he was a boy, the people of Arendelle and his father, the king, went to Northumbria to visit the tribe that lived there in order to gift them a dam. And this was supposed to be a symbol of peace and unity between the two groups, and it ended up being an attack where the Northumbria attacked the Arendellian people, and then the elements reacted, and it caused this cloud that took over the entire area, and their father was saved by somebody. Spoiler alert, it's the mom. And no one knows except Atahala when this spirits will be pleased and it will be lifted. And when we do the time jump, we see that Elsa is hearing these voices that are calling out to her, and we get into the unknown, which is mwah, so gay, so great, loved everything about it. And when she uses her powers, she accidentally unleashes all of these mystical forces, and the group has to go up, figure out what happened, and get the truth about their heritage and their legacy. And while they're there, they find out that their mother is from that tribe, and they have this sort of mixed indigenous heritage. And that heritage and their mother saving their father is why Elsa was gifted these powers. She was gifted them to be a bridge between these two civilizations, and throughout Elsa's arc in the film, it is about her understanding that heritage and having it make sense of all of these conflicting, strange feelings within her, and figuring out that the person that she needed the whole time was herself to give her these answers. And it ends with them figuring out that what happened was that their grandfather was a racist and he betrayed the indigenous tribe and started everything. And in order to correct what has been done, Anna, who is left to become the ruler of Arendelle once Elsa dies from being overwhelmed by the ice energy, Anna gets the rock giants to destroy the dam. And by destroying the dam, the spirits by destroying the dam, the spirits are pleased by this, and Elsa is allowed to be unfrozen and go save Arendelle before it gets swept away by a tidal wave. In the end, Anna becomes Queen of Arendelle, and Elsa stays as the bridge between the Northumbria people and the spirits as the Avatar, essentially. And the sisters, while now physically further apart, are closer than ever and have new ties to this culture that they never knew they were a part of. And they both get to be the people that they always needed to be for each other and for themselves. I understand the criticism of Frozen 2 being narratively disconnected from the first, because I think it's very clear that these two movies do not have very clear intersections. A lot of the elements that are brought up, such as like Elsa playing with her mother's scarf, didn't exist in the first movie. The mother's design, I believe, if she was intended to be indigenous the whole time, while the Northumbria group are based off of the Sami and they are white indigenous peoples, the Northumbria do have a particular sort of phenotype that the mother does not have. And I do think that if they had always intended for Anna and Elsa to be mixed, they would have wanted to get that capital at the beginning and done this. I think this was a way of talking about the tribal issues that were present in Frozen 1. And I know that they talked with the Sami people in constructing these storylines. So I think all of that was done to retrospectively give a little bit more to the communities and to tell, honestly, a very important narrative about colonization and indigenous peoples. And I think it also doesn't feel entirely false, because for a lot of colonized people, that's kind of the reality of our situation. A lot of people, Black, Indigenous, and other colonized people, have a very complicated legacy with our own heritage. Many of us have ancestry that we will never have access to because we were kidnapped from the lands of our origin and had assimilation put on into our families. There are white passing Indigenous people who may very well have Indigenous heritage, but because of kidnapping, because of forced assimilation, because of racism and because of racist practices, may never get real access into that part of their heritage. And I think that's what makes the Elsa and Anna story so poignant. Many of us have ancestry where we have both the victims and victimizers of colonization in us. I'll never forget the day when my family from St. Lucia sent me a picture of one of my white ancestors, and he literally looked like a colonizer. Like I saw his face. He was in the British Navy, and he had all this very fancy shoulder garb, and he had the mustache with the twists, and it was a real blow to my system, because obviously as a descendant of slavery, descendant of colonization, I know that I have white heritage. Like, I know that's a part of who I am, but seeing it so boldly in my face was just very jarring to know that, yeah, that's part of where I come from. And that's part of the reality for a lot of us out here who are either, and that's the reality for a lot of us who are descendants of the disgusting way that colonization has affected our world. And I think it's powerful that a movie like Frozen, that was so popular, chose to have a storyline about that with two of their most popular characters. Like, it is a risk to just boldly say colonization and imperialism are wrong, and this is Disney, so they don't really have morals on top of it. But to have characters that can show that kind of nuance and conversation in a film is really important. And oh my god, these bells. I especially teared up during Show Yourself, because I just think that, you know, as a queer person, as a Black person, that song represents so many emotions. The idea of always looking for who you are, and then finding out that who you are is the person that you are today. I think a lot of people are very critical of things like Ancestry.com, because getting your 23andMe profile doesn't really tell you what your culture is. Your phenotype does not tell you what your culture is. Your culture is what you're raised with, and your culture is what's denied to you when you're stripped away from that. When you are forced to believe that getting rid of it is the best way to survive. And for Elsa, a character that felt so much anxiety and stress and sorrow over who she was and what was different about her, for her to find out that not only was she born with these powers out of love, even though it is problematic to say that Indigenous people should save their colonizers because that doesn't protect them, and we know this, but the idea that Elsa was born of love, and that if she had been raised within her mother's community, she would have been safe. She would have not been raised to feel anxiety for her powers. She would have been raised with an understanding of her abilities. She wouldn't have had to go through so much of the mental torment that she had to go through in Frozen 1 if she had just been able to be exposed to that other half of her identity. And that is also so meaningful. There are so many things that I would have been different about if I had been taught more about global Blackness growing up as a child. If I had been exposed to all of the things that Black people have created growing up, I would have had a very different relationship to my Blackness than the one that I have right now. Like, I have grown into this, you know, confident Black woman. It took me a long time to get there, because when you're just looking at anti-Blackness all the time and you're not being told all the important legacies of who you are and what you come from, it does create a self-hate cycle. And I think in seeing that part of Elsa's story in Frozen 2, it made Frozen 1 that much more powerful for me as a viewer. I also think that the quickness with which Anna and Elsa turned on their racist grandpa made me really happy. Like, I never really liked Anna until Frozen 2. I felt like do the next right thing, which is a line that I quote all the time because it's so good. Her, after thinking her sister is dead and watching Olaf die, and he could have stayed dead as far as I'm concerned, and her just deciding that, like, she has to now go out and right the wrongs that have been done by her own grandfather, it told me more about Anna in that one song and in that one sequence than anything that happened in Frozen 1. And that's what I think music and storytelling should be. Like, it should teach you about the arcs that these people have gone through. And through Frozen 2, I saw that Anna was someone who could stand on her own 2 feet and was determined to do the right thing, even at very high emotional cost to herself. That she was so willing to do that, was so powerful, and how she stood that ground and she took a risk even though it could destroy Arendelle. But she knew it was the right thing to do because it was unjust. And honestly, with the quickness that she turned her back on her white colonizer grandpa should inspire all little white children that are out there in the world. Because that's, you know, some of us have family members that are racist. Some of us have racist, terrible ancestors, me included, because slavery, you know. Being able to acknowledge that and then do what is proper afterwards is so important, because so often people are like, well, what do you want me to do? I couldn't help the fact that my grandfather was a this or a that. It's like, you work towards doing good things in this life. Anna chooses to make a huge sacrifice to herself because she knows that it is the only way to make up for the evils that are done. And I'm not saying you have to go blow up buildings, but maybe, you know, be more involved in reading about Indigenous issues going on now, especially because a lot of them have to do with white people taking land that belongs to different Indigenous tribes and populations and trying to make these ecological developments or these scientific developments and be like, it's a good thing, it'll help you, even though they're saying we don't want it. So if anything, it's a very big call to action to be aware of the wrongs of the past and work to correct them as best you can. And I think for a movie like Frozen to end with the message of, like, from this colonizing dingus now comes, you know, we're gonna end the series with 3 Indigenous monarchs, because Kristoff is supposed to be Sammy, Anna is mixed race, Elsa's mixed race, and so when Kristoff and Anna get married, they're gonna be Indigenous monarchs. That's gonna make Grandpa so angry in hell, and I think that's great. I think that's so important, and I think those messages, while maybe not as seamless as Frozen 1, are much more important than what was in Frozen 1. Frozen 1 is a fine movie for people that are not me, and that's not shade, I just don't care for it. But if we talk about raising the standard, in terms of using the medium to tell important stories in a fun way, I think Frozen 2 really did that well. And I also get that it isn't perfect with dealing with the Indigenous issues. It certainly is, and I'm not an expert in that. Like, again, my friend wrote that thread. And the Sammy said that they consulted. I'll link to all that down below so you can judge for yourself, and you should judge for yourself. But I will say, just on a surface level, as someone who, I may not have Indigenous ancestry, but has, like, been affected by colonization in my heritage, it rang very true. And I think that if you are someone who doesn't have a very straight line in your ancestry, or a straight line in knowing where you come from, it is a movie that hits on those things, and I think it's important. We don't have many movies where it's like your biological family is monstrous and you have to work out of it. Usually they twist it with them, oh, you know, that's your adoptive family. Your adoptive family is gonna save you. It's like, no, sometimes you have to cut the ties of the people in your life that are your blood. Anna said Indigenous rights and blew up a bridge. So because of all those reasons, I think that Frozen 2 is great. I also love the music, and when this movie ended and Brendon Urie started singing Into the Unknown, girl, I lived. Because you know Black people love Panic! At the Discos. That's a fact. And Brendon Urie's vocals, that is like my second favorite Disney to Burlesque song. The first is the Oogie Boogie song from The Night Before Christmas, because that is also a great song to burlesque too. But yeah, that was amazing. So, and then Casey Musgraves, Soundtrack is amazing. Better than anything in Frozen 1. Even though it had a Demi Lovato cover. And I love Demi and her cover is good, but like, that was fire. I loved it. The music is better. And it also, like, I actually thought Olaf was more endearing in this than in the first one. And again, I hate Olaf, so that says a lot. So if you didn't like Frozen 1, I would say try giving Frozen 2 a chance, and if you didn't like Frozen 2, I respect your opinion, and hopefully there won't be a Frozen 3. On that we can all agree with. We don't need a Frozen 3. 2 is good enough. If you're gonna make a sequel to something, her name is Moana. Say it, speak it, live it. And on that note, if you enjoyed this video, please thumbs up, like, subscribe, and share. I also have a Patreon, and I know everything is going crazy right now, so feel free or not to donate. But if anything, just sharing, getting interactions is a big deal, and getting all this happening. We all know the algorithm is racist anyway, so any help you can give me in terms of getting this video out there, much appreciated. And I will be seeing you soon because I have nothing else to do but make different kinds of content. So more things are coming. Can't wait to share it with you, and I will see you guys soon. I'm gonna go clean my makeup brushes.